Consciousness, the final frontier. These are the voyages into the universe between your ears. Our mission, to explore collective wisdom, seek out amazing secrets, and spread the message of personal potential.
All right. Hello, everyone. I am Tim C. Starr. I'm your host for The Universe Between Your Ears. Thanks for joining us on this particular voyage. My co-host, Gabi Masheyev, is not likely to be joining us. We'll see if he gets to pop in somewhere in the middle of things, but for right now, we're assuming he's not going to make it. So it's just me and our guest. I might as well tell you who that is. His name is Dean McMurray. Let me just read you his bio. Dean spent most of his childhood in northern Minnesota. He developed a deep love for nature and his country, and that love of country inspired him to enlist and serve 24 years in the U.S. Armed Forces. Dean's service brought him overseas on several occasions, the last of which awakened his psychic abilities and set him on a new path in life, a new mission with new marching orders. After returning from his last overseas tour, Dean's deceased grandmother paid him a visit. She had a message for him. "You are a medium, Dean. It's time to get to work." No words, no sound, but the message was as clear as any he'd ever heard. It came straight from his grandmother's immortal heart to his own. Dean, welcome. Thank you for joining us here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on, Tim.
You're welcome. I've been looking forward to having this chat. I say that a lot, and it's true, but I think this could get really interesting here today.
I'm excited.
Yeah. So let's talk about, man, there's so many different things to talk about here. Let's talk first, I think, about, so that people are clear about what a medium is. Why don't we start there, and then, so if you'll give what your definition of it is, and then maybe give us the backstory, where this come from, and
Sure.
how did you get to be sitting here?
Sure. Well, and there's a lot of confusion, too, because, it's the title psychic medium. A lot of people say, well, what's the difference between the psychic and the medium piece? A medium basically is a person that can connect to and communicate, meaning two-way communication, just such as you and I are communicating with those that have crossed over. Okay? So, and other entities in the spiritual realm or other different dimensional realms, whatever label you want to use. The other piece is in the psychic piece of that, is a psychic is somebody that can read energy, or when we start thinking about past, present, future stuff, or somebody's aura. Now, the thing that I would always caution somebody is that I know a lot of psychics that are also mediums, but they don't embrace the title of medium, but they're very gifted in what they do. And so that's the thing, labels can be a tricky hazard sometimes.
Absolutely, yeah.
We paint ourselves in a corner and they're like, oh, you're not a medium, but you're a psychic, or you're a psychic, but not a medium. Not quite necessarily always that, get very specific in what you're asking. Do you have the ability to, or are you aware of, this? And then they'll be able to answer you much clearer, because just throwing a label out there saying, I'm a pipe fitter, you might be able to do so many more things than do pipe fitting. So the same.
Well, and it's kind of good that you brought this up right now, because I was on your website a little earlier, and there's a little snippet of an interview you were doing with somebody, I think it was in a magazine.
Okay.
And you were talking about these different abilities that you have. Claire, all the different Claires.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And do you want to go into that and sort of?
We can, and a lot of people say, well, how does it work for you? What, basically. So the way that I describe it, and you were talking about the Claires, and there's so many different Claires. So clairvoyance.
I never referred to it before like that. It came to me right now.
But and some people call them the Claire sisters. There's a lot of other terms, but clairvoyance, the ability to clear seeing, clairaudience, which is clear hearing, clairgustance, which is clear tasting. You know, there are so many different clair skills. And what I do is I take, if you will, my quote-unquote psychic abilities, and I blend that into and allow that to enhance my mediumship session. So when I'm connecting to, we'll just say, Grandpa Joe or whomever, and saying, you know, I use all of my abilities in my toolbox, all my tools, to saying, hey, geez, you know, I can really taste, you know, Grandma's apple pie right now, or I can smell your Uncle Joe's cologne, or, you know, whatever it is. Just the other day, I was doing a reading for a client, and she had a grandfather that he was quite the drinker when he was younger. And the first thing that, even before I got any descriptions, is it was like somebody put a whiskey bottle underneath my nose. And it was something that, you know, if you've ever maybe in your younger day and partaked in a little bit of whiskey, it's something that you can't forget. And so if you ever smelt it, and and I was like, wow, that's whiskey, very clearly. And she was like, oh yeah, my grandpa was a big drinker. And so that's something I just, you know, to you know, or if I'm able to see things or whatever, so I blend those into my reading. And really with my students or other folks, I really encourage other people to, I guess, enhance their abilities in those areas, because they can be powerful tools just unto themselves as well. So
are what I'm getting is, and correct me if I'm wrong, these different clair abilities are sort of under the larger umbrella of psychic. These are components of psychic abilities?
For the most part. And again, we go back to labels. You know, we start throwing them around pretty loosely when we start getting in the nuances of what's psychic and what's not. But in a sense, yes, because it is something where you can start connecting outside of your body, because it's considered the psychic sense, or, you know, the sixth sense, the energetic. You're connecting energetically to these abilities. So whether you're using, if you will, your third eye, or your telepathy, or different things, if you're, connecting through energy, or however you're perceiving or understanding it, it's outside your body. So, so absolutely. Is it in that psychic realm? Yes. And some of it kind of crosses a line into some other stuff as well.
Okay.
But absolutely, it's kind of, and when we start getting into, again, Tim, and some of these nuances of abilities, and well beyond the clair skills, clairvoyance and all that, and clairaudience and such, it kind of goes beyond the psychic stuff, because you start talking about saying, how do you really describe that in one label per se?
Right.
And so you start getting what I call like spider webs that go out into other little factions or other little areas. And it can be a multi-leveled thing to do with.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Again, I think that most people, when they think of someone who's a psychic, I think they probably are thinking fairly specifically in terms of clairvoyance. Am I right? It's sort of like you can see things.
Yep.
Right? They really don't even, I don't think the average person ever considers you might be able to taste something that
right.
someone not in the room is tasting, right, or used to taste, or hear, hearing maybe, but like the more, I want to say more personal senses, like taste and smell, those, and touch, right, feeling, those things are generally things that can only happen right here.
Right.
Vision, you can see from 100 miles away, right, whatever.
Right.
But
so I use the example of the pen. So you can physically see the pen that I'm holding. But if you had a grandfather that stepped forward and say a watch, or maybe a grandmother that came forward with a something, maybe a blanket or a a neckerchief or something that was very specific, and where I could feel the material psychically, if you will, and saying, hey, that's silk. And how do you feel? You're feeling energetic.
Right.
And it's a concept that most of us, if you will, the general population, I'll just call it, is not accustomed to. And it's interesting because I really believe that, and I'm a firm believer in that we all have this ability.
Yeah, I agree.
And that if we're able to connect to the energy of and saying this is what it feels like. And then you go back into your own memory. And something that I found really interesting too, Tim, is spirit can only communicate with the individual. So if they're communicating with me information for you or whomever, they can only communicate information as far as I can understand. So they're tapping into my knowledge database that's from my life experience thus far. And if I've never touched, seen, smelt, or even tasted what we'll just say a chocolate chip cookie, maybe I've never even heard of it, and be like, oh my God, there's this round. How do you describe something like that? And so you do the best that you can, and especially colors. That's a great one, because there has been times where I've been given or shown something that there's nothing on this earth that is like that. But you can only say, and if you could see the reddest red that you have ever seen, and then multiply it times 1,000,000, it might come close, but it's not. It's like, how do you describe? So you have to do your best as what I call the vessel, because that's what I am. I'm just open, and I'm as a vessel, and just trying to do my best to describe what I receive. So without filtering it in any way.
Yeah. All right. So let's kind of get I want to call this housekeeping task out of the way. Let's talk about, so that it'll free us up to just go wherever we want to go. Sure. Let's talk about how, the background and how you came to be aware of this ability, and your understanding of what the heck happened to you.
Well, the bio summed it up pretty good. Born and raised this in a traditional household, just like everybody else. Go to church on Sunday, Sunday school, all that great stuff. Actually, I went to a Protestant church growing up, and my mom was a very big proponent of attending Sunday school, even if we didn't want to. And then as we got older, I didn't feel that I really fit into anything mainstream. And that's something that I really remember. It wasn't an open spiritual household. So anything, if there was anything about spirits or ghosts, or, it's like, oh, that's a dream or a nightmare or whatever. So I wasn't open to anything as far as spirits or, talking about mediums or anything like that. And again, talking about in the bio, it wasn't until, it was almost talking about 20, it was about 21 years that it took for me, that I served in the military. 14 and a half years was with the regular Army, and the last actual 10 was with the Army National Guard here in the great state of North Dakota. And but around for about 21 years while I served in the military, I wasn't aware anyways of what I was doing or what was going on. And like you said, it wasn't until I got back from my last overseas deployment, a lot of paranormal activity started happening in my home. And I was like, what the heck's going on? And my wife suggested that we get a hold of this psychic that she had been seeing in our local area. And I was quite jokingly referring to her as the voodoo chick, and because that was my language.
Sure.
And you have to understand, if anybody knows the military, and especially my given job for over, most of my adult military life was infantry. So I was a ground soldier. So I came from the alpha male world of, if it's not sweating or bleeding or, it completely, and I wanted to show contrast because that is a completely different world compared to where I am now. But this was something that had my attention because I couldn't put logic to it. And I was like, and I was doing the, standard, hey, did that picture just fall because I didn't have the drywall anchor in, that type of deal.
You're looking for all the rational explanations.
And long story short, this psychic had told me, Dean, your grandpa's here. He's supporting you. And of course, I wasn't in a space to receive that message. And basically, I kind of just brushed her off. And she said, well, you'll figure it out. Well, a couple weeks later, all right, are we back?
We're back. I don't know. That was odd. Somebody came and took you away. I don't know.
Spirit playing games, perhaps.
All right. You were mid-sentence a couple of weeks later. Why don't you pick up from that point?
Right. So getting to the point where my grandmother actually came and visited me. So we were talking about that claircognizance, that clear knowing. And as I was sharing, I was washing bottles for my newborn son around midnight, I think it was. And I just had a knowing that washed over me that my grandmother was there. My grandmother passed in the 80s, and I was quite young. And I was like, how do I know it's grandma? This is kind of freaking me out, And, it was just, well, there's nothing freaky about it. It's just grandma. And I was like, boy, is this how people start going crazy? And I was, many, many things were going through my head, and everybody was asleep. So I went to bed knowing that my grandma was there, and so I was laying in bed and trying to go to sleep. But at the same time, my curiosity got the best of me, and I was continually talking to her one way. I wasn't receiving anything. It was like, if you had the chance to talk to a loved one, what would you say? And so it was kind of that, hey, love you, miss you, all that great stuff. And then my ego popped up. I lovingly refer to my ego as my drunk friend. And because it's, it always says, we're always our biggest doubter and, our biggest enemy. And my ego was like, you know what, Dean, you're just making this up, maybe a little tired, whatever, trying to put, things to it. Why don't you just have her prove it? Why doesn't she prove that she's here? Well, as soon as I thought those words, she turned the room completely ice cold, like somebody flipped a switch immediately. And so where I could feel it physically, and I was like, holy crap. What did I do? Who did I make mad? And so I continually talked to her one way. And then again, my ego popped up and said, you know what, Dean? This is, you're just completely making this up. This is all BS. Let's just get it all done and out in the open. Why don't you just touch me? And so from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet, a gentle yet firm pressure pushed me into the mattress. And it was something that I could physically feel and hear. I could hear the springs compressing in the mattress. And it was something that, it wasn't, I should say it wasn't something where it was, kind of choking me going, you will believe, but it was just that where I became heavier than the mattress. And immediately, of course, she had my attention because at that point I thought, oh my God, I really broke the fifth seal to hell. What did I do? And I kind of refer to as the little 6-year-old boy in me come out and goes, all right, Grandma, love you. We'll see you soon. Like basically like, all right, time for you to leave. And as soon as I did that, everything returned to normal like it never happened. But I sat up in bed completely covered in sweat. And my wife, who was the mother of our newborn, who never sleeps deep, was like sleeping like she hasn't slept in a week. And I had to wake her out of this deep sleep. And I said, there's somebody here. And she was like, how do you know that? And I said, exactly. I don't know. And so I told her the whole experience. And I said, you need to get Voodoo Chick over here right away. And she said, Dean, it's like 2:30 in the morning by this time. And so fast forward some time, and from that point in time, and where I ended up taking some of this, some classes from this lady in my area, and anytime that I saw something that I was quick to be very skeptical of or cynical of and saying, that's BS, or I don't believe in that. It was almost like a gentle voice going, well, how can you explain the other night? And I'd be like, well, I can't. And saying, how about you just stay open? And so after that, every time I would see something, if I couldn't quite go there, it was just like, just stay open to it. It doesn't matter if you can't quite go there yet. Just stay open. And that's how my approach has been. If there's something that if it's pushing my boundaries, if you will, of what I understand, I just stay open to it and saying, it's kind of like the bulletin board. And sure enough, it kind of guides me right through it or right beyond it. So it's but I ended up taking a course in mediumship. I took a course in dowsing. Of course, as you probably know, the universe opens one door, and if you choose to take a step forward through it, it just seems to provide another door and another door.
Absolutely.
And then you just go on this journey of really figuring out, what does this mean for me? And that's what I wanted to figure out, because quite honestly, it was Dean the Soldier by day and Dean the Medium by night, because I was still working as a full-time soldier for the Army National Guard. But yet all of this was developing, and I was like, what does this mean? I was getting ready to retire. I had plans of working for the local VA, and that wasn't the case. The old joke saying, when man plans, God laughs.
Yeah.
And I think a whole lot of the universe was laughing, because I was like, what does this mean for me? And I've been retired now. May was 5 years, was a 5-year mark for me. And I've been on this journey for 8 total years in my spiritual journey, if you will. But I feel humbled each and every day that I'm able to do this, and, to help people connect and heal in some form and fashion. So
the thought occurred to me, this has to be a lot more interesting than anything you would have been doing with the VA.
Oh, absolutely.
Fill out another form, dude.
Right. Yes. Wow. Yes, I agree. Maybe donuts in the break room. I don't know if they do that.
Yeah.
So.
Psychic donuts.
Psychic donuts. There you go.
So, all right. So what is it? So I'm trying to envision, how are you do this full time now as a business?
I have been for 5 years. As soon as I retired, that's what I transitioned right into.
Wow. Yep. Okay.
So, and that was the thing, that, because you have to understand, remember, I shared that my son was a newborn shortly after return. So, my kids aren't that old. I got an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old, so the thing is that, it's been kind of a crazy ride, because, you got young kids yet. And, at the same time, a lot of people say, well, geez, you can't full up retire. There has to be something. Yeah. And because kids don't come cheap. But at the same time, as a dad, and with me and my wife, it's, everybody's got bills, and saying, okay, Dean, what are you going to do after you retire? And if you would have told me that I'm going to be a medium, I would have told you you're crazy, because, and I certainly don't do this to, A, get rich, or B, get famous. I do this to help people. And, and I always joke with people saying, if they're doing it to get rich or be famous, they're certainly in the wrong occupation. But the thing is, it's more the payment comes in a higher form, because it's not only that connection to the divine, but it's also that ability to be part of somebody's healing or somebody's process. Because there are so many stories out there of where folks are, whether they're dealing with depression, suicide. They could be dealing with, different levels of grief. They could be in a great space and they're just looking for guidance. But the thing is we're all in different places. But the humbling piece that I always look at is, for however long I meet with a client, I get to be part of their life and meet their interesting and sometimes very interesting family members for however long we have a interaction together.
Yeah. So, well, you're also, you're in a position on a regular basis to touch people in a way that can change their lives. And I would think, I think that's a piece of what we all want. We don't necessarily even recognize that, but I think that a piece of what we crave as these energetic beings in this physical experience is touching that I don't want to use the word psychic, but just touching that energetic piece of somebody else in a way that you at least know that you've touched them, whether they recognize it or not, because we're all connected. We're all part of the same thing, and I think that's part of what we're trying to do is to make that a larger, more consistent, more omnipresent experience, is to have that connection with something higher.
Yep, absolutely. And you said you're right on it too. And the thing is it's a soul-to-soul connection. I'm connecting my energy to theirs. I'm basically, if somebody wants a visualization, I take my extension cord and plug it into them. But in a sense, in a good way. But the other thing is really it goes beyond healing, because what we ultimately want is somebody to get through, because we all have stuff we're dealing with, every one of us. But what we ultimately want is to get through the healing and get into a place of empowerment and teaching and talking about spreading the light. Well, what is the light? Talking about happiness, love, compassion, things, because just turn on go on social media or go on any news source, and you can see all the strife that's going on right here in the United States or across the globe, and saying there needs to be so much, not only healing, but empowerment, because those that want to control others take away the power.
Right.
And, talking about less than or putting people in a fear place, and saying, but where I come from is talking about giving power, because really I'm a proponent of saying you don't need a medium. You don't need Dean McMurray, the psychic medium. You don't need the military medium. You may think you do, but really in reality, if we're all mediums, then you don't need me. If we're all psychics, you don't need me or somebody else. However, is there always going to be people that need assistance? Yes. Is there? Because it's just the way it is. However, it's about helping somebody and then empowering them and saying, now I want you to go help that person. And the leapfrog, you're hoping the leapfrog, so you think of the candle analogy, I'll help you light your candle, now I want you to help light, and shining that light, so to speak. And that's,
you're paying it forward and hoping that others do the same.
Right, absolutely.
So how, I'm guessing I already know the answer to this, but when, so let's say let's back up a little bit in our conversation, but the morning after you had this experience with your grandmother visiting, and you gave the whole story to your wife, what was her reaction? Was she just sort of, I could see it going in a couple of different ways, but you already said that she was already connected to the voodoo chick. Right. So she's probably pretty accepting of it, I'm thinking.
Well, she was. And you know what? If it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't be who I am. I certainly would not be I wouldn't be the man that I am today by any means. I truly believe in the old adage of behind every great man, there's even a better woman.
Mhm.
And my wife has always been and is like one of my biggest cheerleaders, which I'm very blessed to have her there in my corner. And it has from the start. She actually emailed me when I was overseas and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I had the house doused." And I said, "What is dousing?" And of course I'm looking it up on Google, and I was like, "Oh, water witching, with the L rods." And
Right.
I seen Discovery, right? And, so when I did that, I was like, whatever. But she was already into that kind of stuff, even though I really wasn't. She kind of was very interested in psychics and energy and crystals and that stuff. And, it's kind of funny because there are, I've come to learn there are no coincidences. There are no synchronicities. It's a divine plan that is being, acted out and orchestrated. And the people that are in our life are there for a reason. And it's always interesting to me, the people that come and go out of your life. And so, yeah, with that conversation, my wife was very much, I was like, what does this mean? She said, well, first and foremost, you if figure out what it means for you, because she knew that I had to accept it, because it was like, it's like, if I came up to say, Tim, you're from Mars, and you're really, that's where you're from. And it'd be like, what does that mean? It's like, so you have to figure out what it means for Tim. And that's what I had to go. I was like, I don't want to, you got terrific people out there like James Van Prague and James, all those folks, John Edwards and Tyler Henry and all those folks, and so many more that are in local and regional areas. But one of the things I said, I got to figure out what this means for me. Will I be in the back alley giving readings? I said, I don't, and I was joking, and I said, I really don't know what that means. And it's kind of funny because I did end up in our basement on a card table. Right before we moved, we had most of the furniture out, and I was in the basement with a card table and a nice tablecloth giving read. I didn't have a crystal ball, but
a big cone hat with
right
Zoltar from Big or whatever.
Right, but and a lot of people, it conjures up a lot of different images for a lot of folks.
Absolutely.
And but one of the things I can chuckle now back looking, the hindsight is 2020, but it's interesting, and just the way the twists and turns lead you. So
I'm thinking, your wife probably, I'm guessing your wife at some level went, oh, this is so cool, he can do it, because it seems like people who are very often people who are just interested in all these different things don't have their own sort of real ability, or we've all got it, but nothing has come out, right, that they can just go out and latch onto it and run with it and really dig in. So, you're looking around and everything's interesting. But if you've got somebody like in the bed next to you, or somebody, that you're hanging out with all the time who can do it, got to be fun, got to be exciting. And go,
She always used to joke. She's like, you think that's cool? I get to sleep with the medium. So she used to joke. But the thing is that, I joke around with my wife. I said, you're my best customer. Because I said, she's like, hey, I could use a reading. And I'm like, really? I'm, sitting down to read the paper or whatever. And I was like, and so she'll always ask. But one of the beautiful things in this, and of course, like you said, natural ability that comes to the surface, is, it was the longest time that I kept on telling my wife, oh, you're a medium. She was like, oh, baloney. Mm. And I was kind of funny because I have it in a journal that I had written that she admitted that she was a medium. And I was like, it's just not her, as she says, her gift area. Mm-hmm. My wife we both work from home. And it's interesting. So, but But the thing is that we both do, basically energy work, and I do the mediumship thing and a few other things, and she does a different modality, but it's it's beautiful, and it makes for interesting dinner time talk. It makes and it's instead of talking, we still get the normal conversation. We have our daughter is in competitive dance, so there's that aspect. My son is in Boy Scouts, so there's that normalcy there. If you think, and I always joke around and saying I'm just a normal kid from a small town in northern Minnesota, but oh hey, I can talk to dead people, and it's
Yeah.
like so
there's two things I want to ask. One is, so you've got a partner, you got a spouse. Now you can do a reading for them on a regular basis, and so do the conversations. I'm assuming we're having conversations in some form with these people on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
So do those conversations, how do they change? How profound are the conversations? Are we, because it can't take very long, particularly I think in your case and with your wife, it wouldn't take very long for her to be completely sold that you're legit.
Sure.
So there's no proving that, you're talking to somebody. So what are those, how do those conversations evolve? And then the other thing is the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see signs? And people always talking about how kids are so much more open to all of this stuff than we are as we get older. Have you got stories to relate on either side of that? Or?
Absolutely. And a lot of times, a lot of people would say the closer things are to the individual, the reader, like the medium, it's harder to read. So it's like, even though you could give a reading to, say, your wife, but sometimes I'll say, for example, she had an aunt that passed, and I knew her aunt. But sometimes it's a little bit easier if I know absolutely nothing about the individual that I'm reading and absolutely nothing about their family background, because that way I don't feel like I'm, is it just what I'm making up? Is that something, so there's no doubt in my head. So if I get something completely random, a description, and saying I don't have to wrestle with it. But the thing that I've learned over the years is just to go with what I'm receiving, regardless of how I'm feeling, because that is what I call filtering, because my ego is saying, hey, start questioning my abilities and saying, I need to trust at such a level that whatever I receive, whatever image, feeling, taste, touch, whatever sense or anything is the real deal. And I have to trust that. And I have been shown time and time again. And one instance I will share is it actually wasn't a loved one, but it was around Christmas time, and or right before Christmas time, I should share. And I was still working for the military, and I had come home before everybody else was home. And I had kind of, by this time, seeing spirits in the home was very normal for me. So we're talking about outside of, physically manifesting. So we're see like shadows or something like that. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I got some spirits going on in here. That's all right. And I just keep on doing the deal. Well, we get the, kids come home, we get them to bed, all that great stuff, do the daily routine of our day back then. And my wife and I would take time and just kind of decompress and talk. And I said, have you been noticing the spirit in the house? And she was like, oh my God, I can totally feel it. And she said, I was going to ask you about it, but we just got busy. And she said, well, who is it? So I just took a minute, and it was like this kid showed up. And
hi, this is Tim Starr. Thanks for joining me and Gabi on the Universe Between Your Ears. We really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with us for a little while. And we'd like to see you again. So be sure to subscribe wherever it is you're consuming the podcast from, whether it's YouTube or Stitcher or iTunes or whatever the hell else is out there.
We want to see you again. We also want to hear from you. So let us know what you think of each episode. Let us know if you got an idea for a future episode that you think would be just killer. Absolutely, let us know. All right? Thanks again, and we will see you next time around. Bye-bye.